You're listening to China Manufacturing Decoded from the Sofeast Group. Hello, Adrian and Renaud here for this episode 266 of the podcast. Hi, Renaud.
Hey, hi, Adrian. So, what is the topic today?
Well, we're going French, and there's a French e-bike startup. They're quite famous. It's called Angell. If you're not in the French sphere of things, you might not have heard of them, I suppose. But this is a e-bike brand that has got a lot of press. They've made very, very fancy bikes. They look really cool. I'll leave the links to the videos and some information about Angell Bikes in the show notes. In fact, they've just done a partnership with Mini, the car brand, to release a really super fancy bike. And it turns out that despite being, really, really hot and really popular right now, the startup's basically failing, and it's looking like it's going to go bankrupt and fail. And so we're going to talk a little bit about why could this have happened, and it is quite relevant because they've probably got a strong relationship with Chinese suppliers. Then they're assembling in France, but because things have gone wrong, we're going to look at, well, what's happened or what could have happened to lead to the demise of this popular brand so quickly, even though it's really hot. So, we'll look at the situation, describe the bikes and how they're doing their assembly and the relationships, maybe speculate into what could have happened. It's a cautionary tale. So we'll get into that. We'll get into that in a few moments. But to follow on from our sort of bonus episode earlier this week, which was out on the 4th of Feb, in the States, there were the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, which were then paused. There are still tariffs, as far as I'm aware, on China, additional tariffs of 10% or 10% on non-tariffed items. And then there's also been a lot of up and down about postage now coming into the States. And you mentioned the de minimis exemption for certain packages, and I think it's kind of related to that. So let's just cover that quickly, because if we are shipping to the States, this is important news.
Right. So as we posted just a couple of days ago, I guess, on the podcast, right? We posted a flash kind of update on that. I'm not going to go through all of that, right? Extra 10% tariffs on everything coming from China.
Yep.
If on categories that already had, for example, 25%, now it's 35%. Okay, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
And also, any package sent to the US, if it was declared, obviously not a huge parcel, right? But anything declared with a value under $800 was just going through, considered too small to bother the customs officers. And a lot of companies, Shein and Temu and a bunch of others, and were just shipping directly to American consumers without any regard for compliance requirements or anything like that. And that was really sort of unfair competition for a lot of companies. A lot of our customers, for them, it's really unfair competition. So actually, we're rather happy that this is closing because a lot of sellers from China were just, drop shipping things, and consumers are seemingly more and more used to waiting for, 5 or 10 days for something. If it's cheap, if they buy it in, I don't know, in the TikTok shop or someplace like that, or in Shein or something, they know they're not going to get it tomorrow. And it's just become a huge business. And all of that goes under the radar, under the table, I want to say, right? So on that side, I think most of our customers who want to make sure that there's a level playing field, all the compliance requirements, but also the, maybe their intellectual property rights are, can more easily be protected, et cetera, if the goods are not delivered directly to individual consumers. Because basically, the individual consumer is the importer. So in that case, what do? You're not going to go after them one by one, right? To put pressure to stop buying something, even if it's infringing on your IP and so on. So
Mm.
I think overall this is rather good news for our customers. Now it does make things a bit more complicated for everybody and a bit more expensive. Even sending, prototypes when you develop a new product or something like this, it used to be, okay, let's just send it with whatever, a government post office, or yeah, if you want a tracking number, something like DHL, FedEx, UPS, and so on. And it was, you know, it's fast. It's, well, I don't want to say cheap because it really depends on the weight and volume of the product and so on, but not crazy. And now what's happening is that it's just more paperwork and more expensive. So you want to send something. So now a lot of things are sort of falling into place because USPS announced something, and I think they're still adjusting their policy. DHL came up with something like just today, I think,
Mm.
in Hong Kong, and like, oh, this is a new policy. We're changing things, right? So we'll see much more clearly in a few weeks for sure. But they are already adding an extra handling fee and an extra duty or tariff, right? So you
Yeah,
declare the
there's
value, then right away there's going to be, I don't know, 10% extra or something,
yeah.
plus some kind of clearance fee because, all of that needs to be declared.
Mm.
And the people in our logistics team inquired about that, gathered some information. Basically, it's going to be a lot more paperwork for things that are shipped in parcels. And even also drop shipping, right? So actually, drop shipping is not just unfair competition to our customer. I mean, a lot of companies, let's say for example, they do a Kickstarter or they sell on their website and they accept orders from a lot of different countries. Well, there's a lot of countries where they don't have enough ongoing business to make it attractive to send a whole batch of products, right? So they drop ship there. If you have, I don't know, 20 orders in Australia and 30 orders in Spain and 45 in Italy, etc. No, you're just gonna try to drop ship if possible. Okay. And now like every single parcel has to be declared even individually. I mean, it's just extra cost and extra paperwork, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was me thinking that things were supposed to be getting cheaper now with the new administration coming in. But hey, what do I know? I'm not American. But we don't know whether this is going to remain the same. I mean, like we spoke about tariffs and then immediately that the tariffs were paused. So who knows if there will be some sort of deal struck or changes that come in. But I guess it seems unlikely to me that they're going to make changes that are going to then be beneficial towards those big Chinese brands like you've spoken about, Temu and
Mm.
Shein, for example. But that being said, I mean, we don't know whether it might change and loosen up again. But the costs coming in, yeah, as you said on DHL, you've got import export fee, and then you've also got
Mm.
duty added on as well, and that's the tariffs.
Yeah. I don't think this is going away. There might
Mm,
be some special things, a bit less formal. Who knows? We'll see, right? But I
yep.
don't think we're back to having Chinese shippers like a free for all for all of them just to ship things and declare them under 800 US dollar and get to the US, consumer households that
Mm-hmm.
easily. So we'll
Mm,
see.
yep. So that's something to really consider for anyone shipping smaller
Mm.
shipments now. So yeah, if there's more news on that, we will share it, of course. Right, so let's get on to Angel then. I mean, these are nice bikes, Renault. These are, these aren't cheap.
Oh,
This isn't cheap stuff. This is quality stuff.
mm. Yeah, these e-bikes are sold between 2,000 and 3,000 euros a piece. And they, at least the frame and the handlebars and all of this was custom designed, obviously. Okay, so I read some articles here and there, And it's interesting. It's actually making a lot of noise in France. So that was an interesting one. Plus, it highlights some typical difficulties between, let's say, the brand that comes up with the initial design, the initial concept and design, and maybe the company that does the new product introduction, in industrialization of the product, whatever, like finalizing the bill of material, all this kind of work, testing plan, and so on. And then the contract manufacturer. So we'll get into that, but first, a bit of context, right? Why is this such a big thing? A big thing. Actually, they only sold about 5,000 of these bikes in France. Okay, over, I don't know, they launched in 2001, I believe, 2001 or 2002. And they were planning to sell, many times more, especially during COVID, and people were buying many more bikes and e-bikes. It was really a fast-growing market. And this was launched by a guy called Marc Simoncini, okay, a French guy, French entrepreneur who is more of a software guy. Okay, so that first indication of an issue here. This guy made his money on some matchmaking websites, and he's the founder of a big one called Meetic, Meetic. It's big in France. I don't know if it's big in some other countries.
No, I haven't.
Right. And he sold it and invested in some other companies. And he's a high profile business angel. Okay. He's been investing for years and years in a bunch of companies, and he's still involved with matchmaking things, actually. I'm not sure he sold Mythic, but he's much less involved there, I think. They also did some deals with Match.com and so on, right? Okay. There's a local version of Shark Tank, and he's one of the judges, right? So quite a famous guy in the startup ecosystem in France. He's quite a famous guy. Okay. Did a lot of things behind a lot of projects. Let's say it this way. And in 2019, he wanted to do an e-bike. Okay. That was an upscale e-bike, a premium e-bike. And they say, oh, it's going to be made in France, 100%. So you said a lot of things have to do with China. Well, I would assume a lot of the components come from China or Taiwan, but the assembly is in the west of France, I believe. And the contract manufacturer, I was kind of surprised, okay, is SEB, S-E-B. Actually, it's a big company. They're behind a lot of famous electrical household products in France and in some other countries, especially on the French market. They're really big on the French market. Okay. But I don't know of any activity around, mobility or bikes, right? I don't know what they're doing here. Maybe they were just trying to diversify. I don't know, maybe their French factory was not very busy. I have no clue. But they were the contract manufacturer, okay? And they started on a small scale in the summer of 2020. So that's really after the first confinement for COVID, and a lot of people were really hungry for going outside and buy a bike and an e-bike and so on, right? Very fast-growing markets. Okay. And so in this party, there's actually three parties here, right? There's Angell with two L's at the end. So that's the bike brand, the bike company. Okay. And that software guy, Simoncini, invested 3 million euros there. So, started with a, relatively well capitalized sort of project, and, okay, this is very serious. Let's go ahead. And that's how they get the ear of SEB, a big manufacturing company. Okay. That actually is when it comes to electrical home appliance anyway, is known to do things well. Okay, and I've been in contact with their people in here in Hong Kong a few years ago. I talked with them for several things. They they work in a relatively organized way. They use a lot of the same tools as the automotive industry and so on. Not the same way,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, but they know what they're doing. Okay, they know what they're doing. And in France, I'm sure they know what they're doing in that company. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the first party obviously is the brand Angel that did the initial design of the bikes, and it's a very nice, very pure kind of design, beautiful design.
We should also probably add that it's also quite a connected. It's like a smart bike. So
Right.
it's not just the e-bike. It actually has, a screen. So you're not
Oh
having
yeah.
to use your phone to check, directions and stuff. It's got connectivity with
Mm.
Bluetooth. I think it's got like GPS and things like that. So this is probably the tech side, which the CEO,
Yeah.
this is his sort of specialism. But yeah, so it's not, it's kind of like an IoT bike sort of thing, right?
Oh, this is a very nice high-end bike.
Mm,
Beautiful and with a lot of functions. Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
software behind it, definitely.
Okay.
Now, another, I'll call that a question mark because I'm not really sure, but I guess I saw some comments from specialists, like real designers of bikes, and they said, well, when you look at this bike, it's not designed to be a great bike to ride, and they had some of their own things, okay, I have no idea, right? So, okay, so I'm not going to comment on that. But big question mark, did they actually start from a concept design that was very exciting, a beautiful concept design, and say, okay, that's the way it has to, it's got to look like that. And then maybe they did not do the proper engineering reviews and everything, to make it into a well usable bike. Just the mechanical elements and so on. A bike actually is not a simple product, right? So that's a
Mm,
question mark. I'm not sure. Okay.
mm.
So they were great at getting a lot of buzz, high profile CEO. They actually did a partnership for selling it with Mini, the BMW brand, that line of supposedly smaller cars. I don't see them as small cars now, but
Ah, no, they're pretty big, but sure.
right, right,
Let's go with
right.
that.
But they call it Mini, but anyway, it's the brand, well, UK brand at the start, right? And some of them were branded as Mini, and so about 3,000 euro each.
Yeah.
So pretty good at marketing the bikes. Did they miss a market opportunity? Did they get things wrong? I'm not so sure. Did they get some bad reviews? Maybe, but they only sold about 5,000 bikes over the past 3-4 years. So that's not huge, right? In the premium market, if you have a small startup, of course, it's going to be delighted with that. But when you put 3 million euros to start, plus you get some
Mm,
extra investment from SEB and from the French government and so on and so forth. I don't know exactly, but they raised maybe 10 million euros, maybe more. So
wow.
big thing, right? So 5,000 e-bikes, sorry, it doesn't cut it, right? Okay.
Mm,
And then I guess they approached Seb, and Seb was like very enthusiastic. I'm imagining things here, right? But then they said,
so
okay, well,
Seb,
yeah,
so Seb is the second party that we're talking about.
the manufacturer,
Yeah.
yeah, the contract manufacturer. And then they said, well, you know, let us know when the product design and the process design are ready, and
Mm,
we can do it. But what do you have the final CAD drawings, and do you have the final bill of material? Do you have all the firmware, all the things integrated, connected? Have you done all the safety tests and so on? Because there's compliance requirements. There's some ISO standards that apply to the bikes. Qualify the battery also, etc., etc. Have
mm.
you done all of this work, right? Is it ready to industrialize? How is it actually going to be assembled? How is it going to be tested? Show us how you're going to do that. Okay. So they resorted to a company, a design and industrialization company in France called Kickmaker to do all of that work. Okay, I don't know the details of it, but from what they say, a part of the design and development and the industrialization, basically the new product introduction, the NPI process, was handled by that company. Did they do a good job? No idea. Okay. My sort of question mark here is that this company seems to target mostly startup companies. Okay. Kickmaker, I'm just guessing this is going back to Kickstarter, right? Which is, or at least at the beginning was mostly used by startup companies. And then maybe they grew fast, and then they also worked with bigger companies. So I'm not sure. This is just question mark, right? But I'm also looking at the list of their customers, and I don't recognize any company that actually makes bikes. Okay, so they went to these guys who, guessing, don't know bikes, but bikes is not like a product that you study and then you know how to do it, It's a whole new category. It's not like you do, I don't know, you do Bluetooth speakers and you do certain kinds of IoT products, and then you go into some other IoT products with one different technology or one different kind of component. Okay, you do proof of concept, etc. You say, okay, I get it. I know how to make it work. Fine. You can work that way. Of course, you can go outside of what you're doing. But these guys here, I really have a big question mark in my mind. Do they even know anything about bikes? Because I'm sorry, bikes is not something that you 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 learn like that. How to assemble bikes, how to test bikes, how to do just a proper inspection of bikes. If you want to do a full inspection of a bike, wow, you can spend a week. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many. You can have 500 checkpoints on a bike. So
Easily.
why go to these guys? So who did who defined the reliability test plan? Who defined the safety test plan? Who defined all these things? Who defined the functional testing? Is it these guys who have no experience? Is it the Angell people? Did they actually have experienced people in it? I have a big question mark. Okay, big
Mm-hmm.
question mark. So you see, there's already a lot of question marks in my mind, right? And then they go do that at Seb, which is an electrical home appliance maker. So
Yeah.
you want to make a blender? Yeah, sure, no problem. A carrot shredder, no problem. Like they're the best, maybe best in the world. But you want to make an e-bike? Why you go to this guy? So the problem here is if nobody knows all the safety, functional, regulatory, and reliability aspects of bikes, nobody in the supply chain is going to catch some issues. That is an enormous issue. Okay, so now maybe we can get to the meat of the problem. How did the problem manifest itself? Well, they got some extremely serious safety issues, and they had to recall a bunch of bikes, nearly everything that they sold.
I
Okay,
think like
so
7,000.
5,000 or about
Yeah.
5,000, I think I read. So, and just the size of the recall, when you have to recall nearly everything you've done for a safety issue, which is that the frame itself sometimes breaks, and I think it's the handlebars. handlebar sometimes breaks. Now, I mean, that's like no way, right? It's like the brakes suddenly don't work or something like that. You can't have that happen on your product. 1% of the products have this issue. You got to record everything,
Yeah.
right? However, the fact that they have to record everything also gives me another question mark. What about traceability? How come they had to record everything? If they had a proper traceability system, they could maybe identify that maybe it's this batch here that has most of the issues, or maybe it's that, I don't know, that design or that whatever. You know, you 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 can really circumscribe the point of cause that is leading to this major issue, and
Mm.
just recall the bikes that correspond to maybe that batch of handlebars, right? But if you record everything, well, that tells me, big problem here. There's basically no traceability, right? Very bad, very bad. So again, this is all question marks. This is all very speculative. I don't know the details, but just reading that, so many things come to my mind. Okay, and now, and now, what happens? Okay, so, oh wow, I'm reading some more here. Actually, they raised in September 2023. They raised 20 million euros, and they wanted to go into other European markets with Mini as distributor, etc., etc. Okay, and that obviously hasn't really worked. So all in all, they might have raised 25 to 30 million euros. Okay, and they might have already invested and spent most of it. Okay,
Yeah.
so they do a major recall, and then they say, "Sorry, we're just going under.
Mm.
Sorry, like that's it. We're going to fold the company." So, you know, and now it's like a shitstorm, right? Sorry for the way to say that. And
It's true.
they have a lot of refunds, right? They recalled, they have to give back about 13 million euros, and then they say we don't have that money. And then they say we're gonna fold it. And the CEO, not sure if he's exactly the CEO, but anyway, the founder, Simoncini, says publicly, we're going to sue both the service provider that helped us industrialize the product, so these kick maker guys, and the contract manufacturer, Seb, and then we'll be able to see, who is responsible for what, who's to blame for what, right? And then the people at Seb, they say, well, this whole project is a major commercial failure, right? So don't blame it on our execution. And frankly, we supported you enormously by making it in our own factory, investing money into it by providing cash, facilities and so on. So really, we're not to blame here. And we made it according to the specifications and all documents that you gave us. So, like, no way you can blame us, right? Okay. And so basically, everybody's thinking, well, maybe, okay, all of these things are maybe bad design, probably, right?
Mm.
To me, if the frame can break and cause accidents, I'm 95% sure it's design related, not at least not manufacturing, not assembly,
Mm.
Okay, not assembly. So everybody's kind of looking at Kickmaker, and I didn't see any comments from them. Probably laying low, like, "Oops, what's going to happen here? Maybe we should not touch the products that we know nothing about, right?"
Mm.
But again, I don't want to speculate too much here. Just big question marks, right? And then Simoncini wrote something So he knows like zero, like nothing about manufacturing, like absolutely nothing. Just the way he writes about things, he says, "Oh, it's the way it was pasted, instead of welded." I mean, this guy knows nothing about about manufacturing. Okay, but then he has something interesting. He says, "Oh, clearly, it's not a design issue because the bikes that were branded as Mini had the same parts and the same design, and and like some of the bikes have a problem, some of the bikes don't have a problem. So like he concludes that it's not a design issue. Now I say that that's BS. A design issue can manifest itself only on some of the batches, right?
Mm.
Actually, if you manufacture the same way, you have an issue that comes from time to time. Actually, that's the sign that it is a design issue, and that's very, very common. And sometimes the design, how to say, is not robust and produces that risk, leads to that risk that you're going to have some issues appear sometimes, not always. Maybe the process window is very small, very, very hard to get. Maybe there's an interaction that's very complicated between different, whatever, dimensions or different variables, let's say. Okay. Basically, from what I read here, I'm 90% sure this is a design issue. Now, design might mean that the wrong material was picked. Design issue might mean that maybe the frame tubes maybe were not robust enough, not able to withstand certain stresses. Maybe because they were too thin, maybe because of, I don't know, their geometry, whatever, right? Maybe the design, again, design also involved the process design, They were told you have to assemble this way, you have to weld this way. Okay. Maybe the way that they were told to do it was not the proper way. And maybe it's welding, right? I would say it's probably due to welding. And the welding points on a bike are really, really, really safety critical features of the bike, right? And maybe because of the very special, very minimalist design of the bikes and so on, maybe they had some very specific requirements, constraints about the way to do welding. I don't know exactly. But to me, probably a design issue, right?
Yeah.
So everybody is sort of pointing the finger, at the others.
Mm.
We might not know anything coming out of it until maybe 1 or 2 years later when it goes to court. But I thought that was an interesting topic.
Yeah, it shows that the relationships that you choose, especially when you've got your hardware startup, which this is in this case, are so important. And I know that you've got your suspicions that maybe some poor choices were made. And I mean, it seems that you're correct, because if good choices were made, we wouldn't be staring down the barrel of the gun of this company going bankrupt, and a recall of thousands of bikes, people with bikes that are not safe. Not to mention that the integrated tech on the bikes. What happens if you are still using your bike, right? And then they shut everything down.
Oh, yeah.
Is it going to work? Like, it's got a smart lock that's integrated into it. Is it just going to lock one day and then it will never unlock? That's assuming you want to keep using the bike. So yes, it's a really big mess. And the takeaway for the listener is, well, presumably really important to select partners who have experience and specialism in the product that you're planning to bring to market.
Well, plus also make me think of something. It's all about the validations, right? Who validated the reliability and safety aspects of this product? Yes, if they worked with a company that has brought, dozens of bikes to market, it would be much, much safer, definitely. Who was responsible for actually setting up the design and development process and this, deciding, okay, these are going to be the review steps, the verification steps, the validation steps, the inspection steps, the testing steps, all of that, as basically validation along the design and development process, right? Here, obviously, something went wrong there. I think the fact that years later and thousands of bikes later, they found out about this issue, definitely the validation of the design left to be desired. This is an enormous mistake, extremely costly mistake, right? I usually would not fault the contract manufacturer for that. Who was responsible for setting up the design and development process, the NPI process, all the validations, right? And how was it done? If I were the judge, I would have fun looking into this. There's a lot of questions to ask, yeah? And think about the users, yeah, as you say. The users, either they say, okay, there's a recall, but they cannot buy it back from me. So basically, I lost my money, or I keep it, but at one point it's going to shut down. Well, thank you very much. Two to 3,000 euro e-bike, right? Very nice, very nice. And maybe you were very careful not to buy something from a startup. You bought something, it's branded as Mini, so BMW is behind this. This is pretty serious. Yes. And maybe you hear, this was, made in France by Seb. Oh, wow, okay, that's, big company, $1 billion company, I'm sure. Okay, that's great. And then you end up in this kind of mess. I think the users are very, very pissed. There's thousands of people who are pissed.
Yeah, absolutely, and it should be okay when you think about lots of financial backing, partnering with a large and famous contract manufacturer. It seems like it's got all the pieces in place to be successful, but as you've pointed out, there are potential issues which, regardless of money and partners, it might not have been right. Maybe it would have been better to partner with a contract manufacturer who specializes in mobility, for example, rather than specializes in consumer electronics. Like Seb are making home electronics like Tefal, for example. So that's like kettles, toasters, and whatever. And I'm sure they're great at electronics. And the bike is partly electronic, but when it comes to mobility, you've just got so much stress on the products, from the movement and the points where it's welded, all of these areas. And I'm sorry, but that's totally different to a kettle.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
So it's certainly an interesting story. It probably will be some time before we see exactly what happens, because as you said, it's probably going to go to court, and they're going to look to, I don't know, get like a bankruptcy, and they'll be liquidated in court. So I don't know what's going to come out. We'll keep an eye on it, but it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, a very, very French episode today, but and also kicked off with talking about the small package shipping into the States as well, which is an important one for businesses who are not sending bulk shipping. Good one. And we'll keep an eye on Angell and update you on what happens when we know more.
Great.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review, and share, because it will really help others discover us too.